Welcome back to Transition to Angular 2.0. This is the last video in the component refactor series before we get into TypeScript and the final step of actually converting our code to Angular 2.0. And this step is all about tests. So one thing you may have noticed when we were doing this, all these changes, is that we weren't actually keeping our tests up to date. That's a pretty bad practice. It's not something that we'd want to do. However, to keep each video simple and autonomous, we wanted to just focus on the actual task at hand. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to fix what we already have. So the first thing that we want to do here is let's find our point A. Let's figure out where our tests are at and what's going on. So I'm going to run gulp auto test. Now what this does is this goes in, and every time I make a change, it goes ahead and reruns the test and gives me some feedback. So go ahead and run this here, and I already know we've got some failures, so don't be too alarmed here. So we got 5 failures. I'm going to scroll back up to the top here. So let's see here. It says that the first error is that app features admin HTML was expected to equal app admin. Oh, so remember, back in one of the first videos there, we refactored our code and we moved our admin pages and admin and dashboard outside of the app folder and put them into a features folder. Unfortunately, it looks like we still have some stuff that is pointing directly to the old. So I can see here in the route spec, that looks like my offending line. So I am going to come over here to features, admin, route spec. And let's see here. Oh, yep, sure enough, we did not put that there. So let's grab this. We're going to probably need it in a couple other spots. I bet if we look in dashboard route spec, yep, same thing here. And let's see here. Let's see what happens when I go ahead and save that. Okay, we got down one more failure's gone. Okay, so we got a message count provider. We'll come back to that. We've got an unexpected call to the API people. And we've got one here for getting the app dashboard HTML. Since these are all related, we want to go after these. This is in the sidebar controller spec. So let's go find that. That is located in app layout, sidebar controller spec. Yeah, and so up here, we just need to go ahead and put those in. Let's save it. Now we're down, still have 4 errors. All right. It appears that we have one other place that this is causing a problem. I believe this is actually in our test helper. If we go look in our mock data, yeah, here's the other one. So if we go ahead and paste this in correctly, then save it. Now we're down to 2 failures. All right, great. So this resolves all the template issues that we were seeing. Now we're down to a message count provider, and we've got an error for making an unexpected call to get API people. All right, so let's go look at the dashboard controller spec. That looks like line 13 and dashboard controller spec line 13. All right. So what happens here is we're actually creating, using $controller here, and the name of the controller, it's actually creating an instance of the controller for us. So if we go look at the controller itself, it is getting injected with message count, people, and news. Well, where are those coming from? Well, if you may remember, in our, not the spec, in the route here, we have resolves. And so here's message count, people, and news. So when these resolve, they're actually added to the Angular namespace, and so that they're injectable into our dashboard controller. Unfortunately, that's not happening, so we need to handle that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a mock resolves. And so we're going to come down here into our test helpers, and we're going to create a new JavaScript file and call it, we're going to call it resolve mocks and JS, great. And let's see here. we are going to do our standard iffy. Great. And inside of here, we are going to have our use strict. Great. And then we're going to create a couple of modules. And actually, let's see here. We're going to do angular dot module resolve. I'm just going to do a single module. Great. So now we have our module. And now let's go ahead and create a few constants. Dot constant people. And now we're going to use our existing mock data, which should be on the window. So it'll get loaded into global mock data. So that's actually going to point to this file here, dot get mock people. So whenever we ask for people, then it is going to go use the mock data get people function to return that. So then we're going to do constant again and message count. Great. Oh, we're going to just hard code this with a value and dot constant. The last one is news. And let's see here, title is news title. And description, let's make that news description. We don't need anything too descriptive here. We just need something so that we can then verify that yes, it's actually working and whatnot. So great, now we have our resolve mocks. And now all we need to do is now wire these in so that they're pulling in correctly into the project. All right, so what does that look like? Let's see here. Now we're going to go back to our dashboard controller spec. So in here is where we need to start to make our change. So you notice here, Bard app module app.dashboard. What this does is this actually tells our tests what modules to pull in. So in this case right now, the only thing that we're pulling in is app.dashboard. What we want to do though is bring in app.resolve. Is it resolve or resolve? Let's go look here. Resolve mocks. You know, let's call it resolve. So I like that better. Great, it's app resolves. Excellent. So now that should work. Let's go ahead and run that. Well, we still have failures. So this looks like a different issue now. So that went away. However, now the problem is we have this unexpected API people call. So instead of, when we're testing this, instead of it actually mocking out this call, this is actually making a call directly back to our backend service. And since we have this Bard, verify no outstanding requests, well, this says, hey, if anything comes through that we're not expecting, that we haven't told it about, then it should fail. So the issue here is, if you see, we've got stuff here to mock this out, except for now when we go look at the controller, it's not actually doing the load in here anymore. So it doesn't really need to be here. Where it needs to be now is over on the route, because the route is the one that's doing the calls to get people, get message count, and returning this news piece. So over in the route spec is where we need to move these. So let's go ahead and first take this guy, remove him, and put him over here. We'll just put him right there. And then we're going to go ahead and move our sign-on stub and place this guy over here as well. So now we go ahead and save it. And now we get 3 failures. Uh-oh. So appears that we didn't solve our problem. And that may be, let's see here. Let's move him up here and see what that does. No, we still get the same 3 failures. That one's a different issue. Oh, not able to find, oh, that's why. So here we've got, we'll just go ahead and move him back to where he was. The problem here is we have data service. However, we haven't told him where data service is coming from. So if you notice back over here on our dashboard controller spec, we injected data service, and that then got added to the global namespace. So we need to remove it from here and bring it over here and add it right there. This is starting to get a little long, so I typically like to just have these each on their own line, starting with all the $sign ones first, and then anything that's more what we've written last there. All right, great. So now, now we're down to two failures. Uh-oh, we're not able to find $Q. Notice here we have $Q being used. We didn't actually inject it. Again, that one is over here as well. Here's $Q. Great. Actually, let's do it the other way. I just pull it from here to here. Q is nice and short, so I just like it to be on top there. Great. Hey, we're down to one failure. Fantastic. So, what is this one failure? Well, this failure here is for the dashboard controller spec on line 28. And it's saying that, oh, that's the wrong one. Come over here, much better. Line 28 for the dashboard controller spec, and I expect that something be logged, and it should say activated. So if we go look at the controller itself, it should be saying activated this. However, the issue is that this init needs to be called, and unfortunately though, init is not available. It's not exposed. There's no way to call it from over here. So we have one of two choices. Either we need to remove this, or we need to make it so that we can call the init function. So let's go ahead and do the latter. So we're going to come over here and we're going to add init to the view model. Init equals init. Great. So now it still fails because we're not actually calling init. So let's go ahead over here and just do controller.init. Look, there we go. We're successful. 39 of 39. Everything ran. Excellent. So this is a great starting point. However, this is not where we want to finish because let's go ahead and close all of these. And let's go up here to components and let's go look at our people directive spec. It's empty. So that's no good. So we don't have any tests for our people directive. The other thing I can do is I can come over here under the report coverage folder. I can expand this, and in WebStorm here I can right click on index and I can say open in browser default, so it'll open it up in Chrome, and then I can see what's going on. So I can see here that my people component somehow is getting some tests run against it. I think it's just because it's being created somewhere else, or actually it's just because most of this code is actually just being executed because it's part of the directive itself. The people controller itself, it has nothing that's being executed. So that's why we're showing partial coverage there. So let's go ahead and just minimize that for now, and we'll come back to it. So now what we want to do is go ahead and create our IFI, put our use strict in here, and let's go ahead and start creating some tests. So the first thing we want to do is start with a describe. This helps form our structure for our tests. And our describe, we're just going to call it directive able. Actually, let's make it the same casing, and then give that a function. Great. And all of our tests are going to then be inside of this directive. And inside of here, then I know we're going to need an element, and I know that we're going to need a view model. Now, we're going to need a couple before eaches, and we'll talk about these. Let's see here. In this case here, we want to require modules and inject dependencies. Great. And then the next before each, let's see here, we want this one to be create our directive. All right, and then the last thing we want to do here before we get going too far is verify no outstanding HTTP requests. Make sure that all tests or all external calls are mocked. Why do we do this? Well, we want to make sure that any sort of external calls that we're making aren't going out and actually hitting a resource. These are unit tests, not integration tests. And so anytime that we're making calls to the outside, we want to go ahead and mock those so we can control the inputs and outputs and make sure that we can sufficiently test our services. So in this case here, now we just need to go ahead and pull in our modules. Let's start with that. So Bard, if you don't know what Bard is, go check it out. If you just search for Bard.js, it's an excellent module written by Ward Bell, who developed this for Angular developers to make it simple for doing tests. So in our case here, we're going to pull in app components. And let's see here. Let's actually go look at what's being pulled in by our directive. So we don't have any injections coming in, so that's good. So let's just start with app components. Everything that we need should be contained in that. The next thing, app component. I don't want the whole deal. Excuse me. We want app components people. Just the component that we want to pull in, not anything else. The next thing we want to do is Bard inject. Now this is going to pull in libraries that we need so that we're able to create our go ahead and create our directive, as well as any dependencies for the directive. The directive itself doesn't have any dependencies, so we don't have to worry about that. So I know we need $compile. I know we need $root scope. And I know that we need $template cache. Great. Now sometimes, depending on what we're using, we may need $state. We might need $q if we had any sort of mocks for any data services. However, in our case, we've got it pretty simple, so we won't need any of that. All right, so for right now, that should be good. We've required in the modules, and we've injected our dependencies so we can create our directive. Great. Now, the next step here is we need to go ahead and create our directive. And so the first thing we need is HTML. So we're just going to create a local variable here for right now, and it will be angular.element. And inside of here, it's going to be people. Great. So pretty simple, don't need a whole lot there. Next thing we need to do is get new instance of scope. So we want to say $root scope equals $root scope dot $new. This ensures that we get a brand new scope variable that doesn't have anything attached to it. We don't have to worry about any pollution. Great. The next one we need to do is tell template cache that when we request the template that we're already good to go. We don't need anything from template cache. So we're just going to tell it to use this blank string, and then we just need to tell it, okay, so the component people.html, and it returns this. So basically what happens is when we create the directive, it says, hey, here's my template URL. Oh, let me go load that for you. Well, one of the things that happens before that happens is it checks in template cache and says, hey, do we already have this template local? And if we do, just go ahead and give it to me. Well, we're faking template cache here to believe that it's already got the template that it needs. So why would we then give it nothing? Wouldn't we want to give it the real HTML? Well, in our case here, we're doing unit tests. We're not doing UI integration tests. We're not doing end-to-end tests. All we're doing is testing the functions. Those functions being here. functions like click person. All right, great. So in this case here, it makes it very simple by us just doing this. We don't have to worry about the template. There's no HTML or UI to worry about. All right, so the next step is now we need to set our element variable equal to a compile of HTML. So this takes and compiles our HTML up here. It compiles it. This starts creating the actual directive, and in it, it's injecting in the root scope for that creation. So fantastic. This is now, and understand, it's asynchronously starting to create our directive. So the next thing we need to do is wait for the directive to be created. Great. So to do this, we're going to use root scope again, and we are going to say $digest using this element. Great. So this tells Angular, hey, slow down. Let us go ahead and process this. Or actually, it's the test basically calling Angular, telling it to go ahead and process what it needs to. This is a synchronous call that's happening, and then at the end here, we can then get an instance of our controller by asking element.controller, and we give it the name of the directive. So let's investigate this here. Get the view model. So if we go back to our directive here, notice it has this controller syntax here. This just points to a function. So nice and simple. Since this is a controller and or a function and not an Angular controller, there we go. Since it is that, then all we do is just ask it for what its controller is based off the element. We also give it the name. The name comes from the directive. So we go ahead and just copy the name right here, people, to right here, and that gets us our view model. Great, outstanding. This should go ahead and create our directive for us. And understand that these are going to get called before every single time before we actually run our tests. So the next thing we want to do is just do our first very simple test. And we just want to say it successfully, there's two C's there, creates the directive. Great. So what we want to do is we want to check and make sure that both our view model and our controller have values. Or I'm sorry, element and our view model, there we go, have values. So we want to expect that element to be defined. Great, I'm going to copy this. And the other one I want here is that view model is defined. Great. Uh-oh. So, object is not a function. Oh, gotcha. In my haste, I forgot that it's not just template cache and assigning something to it, or that the template cache is not a function. It is an object, and it has a function on it called put. Easy for me to forget. I save this again. Fantastic. We successfully created that. Great. Now if we come back over here, we have to pull it up here. And if we refresh it, oh, notice, now we got code coverage for part of the controller here. We assign this here. This assignment gets us partial coverage on this. However, we have never called that. Excellent. So we're looking pretty good. We're at 90% on the statements. However, our real logic's inside of here. And this is really what we want to test. So let's see here. Now what we want to do is create a new describe after, what's the name of that method? After click person. Function. And so let's talk about testing. So there's really three basic steps here. Arrange, act, we'll fix that in a second, and assert, the three A's. So our range here would be, are there any variables? Any variables to create or pass in? So in our case here on the people directive, actually we do. We have a person, and we're going to want to then do a Windows alert on that. All right, so in our case here for our range, we want to say var person equals, and I just want to say name is Bob Smith. Great. So now we have a person object. Now we want to act. So now we actually want to say VM, click person, and I want to pass it the person. Great. And then I want to assert. I want to expect that some action has happened. So now what's interesting here is we're doing a really bad thing here, which is we're calling this alert. And we could mock that out, and we could do sign on and do a spy and do all this sort of stuff. However, really the simple thing is let's, since we know this really isn't going to stay here, let's just go ahead and change this out to use what we already know. And let's go ahead and use logger info and bring that over here. And I'm just going to replace, and we're just going to have it log the person object. Now the one challenge here is now we do need logger injected. It needs to be here. And we need to come over here to the spec. And remember we talked about in the inject here that this would be where you added any dependencies. Well, this is a dependency, so we'll want to go ahead and inject that. Great. Uh-oh. So undefined is not an object evaluating VM click person. Got it. So in our case here, VM is not what we think it is. So we have some sort of issue here going on. And we'll figure that out in just a second. Excellent. Let's see. Well, that's going to take a second. I've seen this one before. This is always the fun of coding live here. So in our case here, we're doing logger, info, got it. I believe the problem is that we actually don't have logger. It doesn't know how to inject it is the bigger issue here, I believe is what is happening. So if we go look, these blocks, logger, he is part of the blocks.logger module. Yeah, defined here. Let's go ahead and copy him. And now let's go to our directive people module. Yeah, he doesn't have any dependencies. Let's go ahead and add this guy. And although that didn't seem to fix it, change file, undefined, evaluating VM, click person. All right, great. I believe what's happening, if we come back over here, is let's just do a quick console log of person. Great. Now let's save that, and let's see. So we have a log here. Oh, that's the person. Great. Let's do it on VM. Great. It's undefined. Huh. Okay, however, this said it was defined. So let's go ahead and move it up here. Excellent. This is actually not getting executed, is what appears to be happening. So we would know this actually because if we take this all out, there we get 40 of 40 ran, and we've got the people controller. You can see click person is on there. All right, great. And we put this in, and we don't run any tests, and we're just getting an error directly to here. So what it appears is happening is that this is running before. Oh, got it. So what happens here is the describe actually starts kicking off the tests, or just the describes all run before the its and before the before each. And so what I incorrectly built this test. So all I need to do is add an it. For right now, we'll keep it empty. Great. And if I put this inside, oh, what happened there? Oh, I grabbed too much. That's the problem. I grab this, I paste it. Great. Now, if I run it, excellent. We have it. Everything passed. Now, in our case here, though, we didn't assert anything. We do want to change that. Let's come back over to our controller spec, and we want to see this. We're just going to copy this expect statement right here. We're going to bring it over to the people directive spec, and we're going to assert that logs info logs to match Bob Smith. And now let's run it. Not able to find variable log. Oh, so now we just injected a new variable. So if we go back over here where we just copied that from, we can see that one of the other items that it injected is $log. So if we just copy this guy and bring him over to our people directive spec, excellent. Now, little problem there. Great. Save it. Excellent. Now, if we come back over here and refresh it, we are at 100%, 100%, 100%. Excellent. So, in conclusion, there's how we write our tests. Albeit a couple little glitches there. Be sure to make sure you remember to, inside of your describe, describes create your structure for your tests. The tests themselves need to be inside of the it block. Now, we could have moved a few things like this outside of it, I believe. We could test here really quick and just make sure. And yes, it still successfully runs, no problem. So just make sure that you're using an it before you actually go ahead and do this. Also, if this was an asynchronous operation, then we would need to do this, root scope, $, apply, and then that would go ahead and allow the runtime to execute and complete, and then that way we'd be able to assert that this actually got done. So with that, there is our conclusion for refactoring to component-based directives. The tests for news and container are very much the same, so we're not going to go through and do those. And our next video in our series will be on TypeScript. So that is the next logical step for getting our application ready for Angular 2.0. Thanks for joining us.